Ani Bojo, Tabajamo Banashis Dijnakaz and McDodam Chikchiganing Donjaba. Welcome to the Northern Road Link radio program. I'm Jennifer Ashawasage Pereira, and I'm from Henvey Inlet First Nation, and I work as an Indigenous Relations Specialist for Atkins Realis. And welcome to the program. Don Parkinson is not here today. I work with him, and he's a consultation specialist for Atkins Realis, and we both work on the Northern Road Link project as well as other projects across Canada. And instead of Don, I have Tony McGuire with me today.
Hey, remember that Wayne's World where he freezes up and he just sits and stares at the camera?
Yeah.
That's kind of how I feel today. So sorry, everybody. I'm filling in for Don. I'm not as educated on the topics as him, but I know Indigenous culture and media, and so I'll do my best.
And all of the things. So, just to back up a little bit, just provide and oh wait, cheers.
Yes,
We've got
cheers,
this.
cheers.
Cheers. Cheers.
Don't know what I'm drinking. Anybody? I don't want to show any favoritism.
He's drinking coffee, and I'm drinking a bubbly beverage. So I'm going to back up a little bit. So the Northern Road Link project is a proposed road in Treaty 9. That's to proposed to connect the Webequie Supply Road to the Martin Falls Community Access Road. And I know sometimes I sing the whole song that I kind of made up, but I won't do that to people today. Usually, what we do is provide information on the environmental assessments, where we're at, a little bit of education about those things, along with education and information on the impact statement as well, which is the federal regulation. And the environmental assessment is provincial legislation. But the past couple of shows and today's show, we're focusing on community voices. And so Dawn and Tony had the pleasure of
Yeah.
interviewing Kathy Baxter in December. Why don't you tell us a little bit about Kathy, Tony?
Kathy's my auntie actually. So my uncle married into the Baxters, and so we got our families in Martin Falls. So it's kind of we're connected to these projects intimately as an Indigenous company. We've been working up there for 15 years, and we even have relations in Ubumbatung. Like we're all over. So Kathy has a history of being on the land. Like my mother, she had the tough hands of a woman who cut through moose hide, and so she has a good grip. My mother died with that grip, like from being cutting moose hide, stripping the hide away from the flesh and stuff. My
Yeah,
mother's
strong
handshake was
hands.
like mine didn't compare. She would crush my hand. So that's who we interviewed, a woman who comes from that ilk.
Yeah, I'm really sorry I missed that opportunity to meet Kathy because I
Oh, you
listened to
love
the
Kathy.
interview. Oh, it sounds like it, and she seems very well rounded, and I
Yeah,
understand she's a teacher,
teacher.
and
Yeah,
yeah, and I love all the things she had to say in that interview because you guys sat with her for about an hour for the interview,
yeah.
and it was really wonderful to listen to some of her stories. And I know Dawn started out by asking a little bit about natural law and the guiding principles from Martin Falls and kind of what that means to her, I suppose. And as you mentioned, she grew up on the land and not necessarily in a community, so she traversed the land and knows it intimately, I would say. And so one of the
100%.
things
Yeah.
that yeah, so one of the things that she talked about was, those teachings that she received from her parents weren't necessarily like these formalized, here's about, like, for instance, let's talk about the seven grandfather teachings. Here's what love is about, and here's what respect is about, and so on and so forth. So it really
Yeah.
wasn't like that. It was more through example, right?
Yeah. 100%. You know, we grew up on and off the land. We urban in a mix, and those lessons are kind of natural. Your parents give you,
Hmm.
protecting the bounty and talking about those stories of on the land. And we grew up in poverty, working class, and so hunting supplemented. And so we saw the importance of the land when it came to that. And Kathy and my uncle went on the land with their children because they wanted them to grow up in the land. So shout out Annie. Chalky's no longer here, he's my brother, and Shawnee and Charlie, because they were brought out at a time when Nintendo was big, and they were brought out on the land and learned the land. So they balanced. What's funny, they brought power with them. So Charlie could play Super Nintendo and Nintendo. So it was like finding that balance
Okay.
as an Indigenous family for them, and I like that because that's who we are as Indigenous people today. And I like that we can combine all that together and not just be one sided on one thing, right? Like it has to be this way, or so. I think that's a little addendum to my family with Kathy and what they did as parents and in teaching, right?
Well, and look at what you're doing for a living.
I don't know what I'm doing for a living,
But
honestly.
working with knowledge and technology
No, it's
is the
true. I know.
point
I'm
I'm
just joking.
trying to make. But let's hear that clip from
Okay.
Kathy. Yeah.
Well, we grew up on the Albany, away from the reserve. Mostly, we were alone. Our family and my uncle's family. We were up in Washi Lake most of the time. From there, we traveled wherever, spring camping, fall camping, winter camping, that kind of stuff.
Okay.
And my parents, our parents, my dad and my uncle used to go to Uguki every now and then to go get supplies. I remember that as a kid. And
Was it like going to the big city?
oh, we never went hardly.
Oh, okay.
We
Yeah.
hardly lived on the reserve when I was there.
Okay.
When I grew up, we'd go down to Uguki maybe a week because my dad was always working and doing stuff. So we didn't live there.
So you really lived off the land then? Eh?
Yes,
Yeah.
I did.
In the bush.
I lived in the bush,
Wow.
and I didn't see anything till when I went to boarding school.
Yeah.
When they picked me up, I didn't know where I was going.
Wow.
It's strange, and but you get to learn all these things, all the teachings that they don't tell you. Oh, this is what you're learning today.
Yeah.
Love.
Yeah.
Respect. They don't do it that way. It's just a gradual way of learning. We watch and learn.
Yes.
We know as children that we used to stand there and watch our parents doing something. They don't tell us, come here and watch.
No.
It was just free.
You learned by
Yeah,
just by experience,
watching,
right?
yeah.
By watching them how they live their lives,
Yeah.
right? Yeah.
And it's in there.
That's great.
I forgot to turn my mic back on. I really enjoy that. So I like what she was talking about, that gradual way of learning. And I wanted to ask you, Tony, what were some of the, I guess, indirect teachings, I want to say, that you received growing up with regards to the land or water or the environment, people? It's
Um,
pretty broad.
yeah, no, it's fairly broad. But no, that's all right. Um, we grew up with Pamela or Pimi. That's who raised us, and she wasn't. Our family has a weird history because my grandmother's taken the residential school, and that filtered down to them. So my mother could speak the language, but chose not to teach it to me. But through silent example, I learned a lot of how to be Anishinaabe through her. I think it's kind of goes without saying, like some of the things that we do as Indigenous. It's not always story based, and I learned that. I went to school and I devoured libraries to learn who I was. And then through aunts and uncles, piecing it together, yeah, there was definitely no generalized, like, here's a handbook or a codification. It'd be like, you're going with your uncle on the land. You go with your uncle on the land, or go with your aunt on the land. You'd learn women's roles, men's roles, because they were living them. And even though they were removed from culture, they were living it. It's just there was less Nanabuju, and so I learned respect for the land at an early age. I think I littered once for my mom, and she was just apoplectic.
Oh,
Just simple stuff like, well, because you're young, right? Like I was, or you learn, you don't, to this day, I always joke, and I see a lot of Anishinaabe joke like this, but they got to finish everything on their plate, like to the point of where it's like almost like obsessive, like psychologically, like you got to finish what's on your plate because that animal gave its life. So it's like at the very least, eat all the meat on the plate, because it's the respect for that. We learned about animals, to respect them. But not so much about like Eagle, because I'm Eagle Clan. I'm the only one in my family. My mom said she knew I was at an early age, and everyone else is Bear. So we didn't learn those teachings. I had to go out and learn those because the family just wasn't really talking about them.
yeah.
So, but I always say it went without saying. And I think that's true of Anishinaabe culture as opposed to other cultures, is that we're kind of silently doing and learning and teaching things. We don't always, you know what I mean? It's not always, here's a big lesson and it's called this. I think that's unique
Yeah.
to Anishinaabe and not so much other indigenous peoples.
I think a couple of things there, because a lot of things are not articulated,
Yeah.
right? And we don't get this big book as you said. And I like what you said about going to the library to devour these books, because I'm one such person, and I like reading a lot. And it was in some of the books, the more academic textbooks, where I found some of that articulation,
Yeah.
for the ways that I was brought up and the way my father taught us to be as well. So unfortunately, we didn't get so much of an opportunity to be out in the land for hunting and gathering and more physical activities like that because my father was born um, unwell. He had a bum ticker. I'll
Yeah.
just say
Yeah.
it
Yeah.
like
Mine
that.
too.
So he died. Yeah, he died young.
Yeah.
However,
Wow.
there were so many beautiful things that he did teach us, like how to respectfully harvest medicines. He taught us about ceremony, and two, because he didn't hunt game, there was a lot of people who would drop off their meat or
Yeah.
the 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 moose or the deer or the what have you. And my father was certified in meat cutting, so that was his contribution to community, and we would get some of that meat. So at a young age, he taught me a little bit about cutting meat and also utilizing all the parts, and we're not to waste those things because that moose or that deer gave up their life for us to eat, right?
Yeah.
And you touched on that a little bit. So those are like really important things to learn about those protocols, and I think that really exemplifies what natural law is. And we were talking a while back, and we were talking about a reciprocal relationship with the earth. And, we have that back and forth relationship because you can't, and I like to say, you can't get something for nothing.
Yeah. Yeah. It's knowledge of that. That's, you know, uh, indigenous law or natural law are these terms. I know in the teachings that I got from my family, as I learned, they had teachings, and I learned them from uncles, or I went and talked to shaman and shay people and shay women. Is that reciprocal nature? You know it when you're young, and you forget it, and that's what culture can do as well. And so, as indigenous. And I know Kathy walks in both worlds. She teaches the language using white methodology, but also keeps her indigenous culture in her heart and works through that. So we're all kind of always balancing that. And I kind of like that because she's from Martin Falls, and that she goes up there to teach kids language and has taught them, but it was still doing it in Anishinaabe way. So I think there's always these balancing factors, and we're seeing that, I think, with this project, and we're trying to, all of us contribute to balance. And so I kind of, one of the things I like about this project is that we're contributing this way, and it only happens through that Indigenous viewpoint, right?
Exactly.
Like, how do you
And when we
balance the
talk about
impossible?
respectfully,
Respectfully, right?
that's
Like, yeah,
my
you just remember
respectfully.
you remember. The elders always say you remember, as a little kid how to respect things out of the box, like except for that real mean kid. There's always that one mean kid, but and we all know who you are, Timmy. No, I'm just joking. But, shout out Timmy, the mean kid. But like you just know better. Most of the things are kind of you already have, and then you forget them as you get older for capitalism or whatever. So you got to kind of go back and go, okay, well. So that's kind of an old teaching, that you already have it. You already have all the thing, you forget it.
I think so, and I think with that, talking about that, I think there's a huge part of that is common sense. I
Yeah,
think,
super.
you
Yeah,
know, there's so many things that are common sense, and sometimes as we get older, when we move away, and I like to say from source, we begin to lose some of that common sense. And as you were saying, going into this capitalistic society, right? I don't know what happens there, but I see that happening every once in a while. And same here with some of my coffees I like to go
yeah,
out and purchase.
yeah. Well, it's like
Not the same thing.
I had I was raised by a French father, but he was Acadian, and then my mother's Anishinaabe, so they fell in love. And then my dad was always on the land. He was always on the land with my mom. He loved being on the land, and so he became very much like I always say. Towards the end of my dad's life, he went fully Anishinaabe. He started believing what we believed, everything. It was very cool transformation. But when I was young, I remember he had a boat, and you would just pour your oil into the lake, right? Like, and that's just like because the lake's
Eee.
big, and well, it's 80s, right? 70s, 80s. It's just how it was. Like, there's a lot of I don't think it was only just Frenchmen doing that, but I say it was just kind of. And so what I said to my dad, I said, these ecosystems are connected. And I was just young, and I think there's a little more education in school going about connected ecosystems. And then my aunts and uncles had taught me, because I'd go with them in summer or go with them, and I'd learned. And so I told my dad, and then he stopped doing that. And so I was just like a really, really, really young man, right? Because it wouldn't be man to be a child, and he stopped doing it. And that's the common sense teachings, like maybe. Because Dad, don't we eat these fish? Like maybe the oil wouldn't that go in them? And then after that, my dad would put it in a sealed container, and he'd figure out where to put it. And so he just never thought about it. And I think there was a lot of people surprised to hear that kind of stuff. Right? They say, "Oh, the oil will biodegrade." No, it actually kind of doesn't. So
Yeah,
maybe over
it's cool
30
that
years or something, but
he listened to you. And then we talk about, he's respecting his child, and then with that, talking about that reciprocal relationship again, and going
yeah,
back to respecting the land, and then also, respect rolls into Minabamadzwin, or well-being of all
yeah,
of us, because that is not just an individual thing, but it's also a very holistic way we look at well-being and health. And so Kathy talked about that a little bit. So if we can hear that next clip.
oh yeah, for sure.
My dad was a big one for telling us to live right, respect everything.
Yeah. Yeah.
It was just there. I don't know. Like he, even when I went to work up north, he used to tell me, okay, when you go up there, you don't look down at people. You don't
Yeah.
call them down. You be nice.
You be nice, Tony.
Okay. It's Anishinaabe are kind of trash talkers, right? So I mean, um, But I always describe though, like when you're raised properly in Anishinaabe and you consider yourself an Anishinaabe,
Hmm.
and I say this is and I 'cause people ask, well, like help me understand this, Tony. I'm not Indigenous, and I go, Indigenous will laugh at a little old lady falling off the bus, but it'll be the first one running over to help her up. Does that make sense?
I, I think that's accurate. Or
Yeah,
maybe
because it's just
maybe I would help her first and then laugh after I know she's okay.
I'm saying like we'll always go over when you're taught and respect for others is and we're not all perfect. Like Anishinaabe culture isn't perfect, and rumors and innuendos and stuff. She's so right, and we're because people are people, and so you get caught up in that. But you do your best to try to be accurate, be truthful every day of your life, right? And that's all you can do. And I like that she said that because
Hmm.
that's a really common teaching. The Anishinaabe
And
give their
pretty basic,
youth.
yeah. Because I grew up with that as well, because my father would say that, when we go out in the world or we go to other communities or even elsewhere in our own communities, we are representing our family.
Yeah,
And then when we're elsewhere, we're representing our community, right? And that matters because and you even heard me typically when I introduce myself, I always say who I am, where I'm from, and being from Henvey Inlet First Nation, wherever I go, I'm also representing my community. So I think that helps with behaving myself, if you will. You want to be able to represent, well, I want to be able to represent my community in a good way, and that they're proud of me, right? And I think that goes for many of us.
I think I think Jen, you're already pretty tame. Like you maybe like you rip the thing off a pillow. You know where it says don't rip that off. That's. I was a little bit more wild, but yeah. Like, did you rip the mattress tag off, Jen? Oh, geez. Oh, geez. Um,
I'm gonna call the police on you.
yeah, yeah. I gotta alert the authorities. Um, yeah, my mom. Yeah, you represent your community. You try to be perfect. We're imperfect human beings. I'm sure some people in Thunder Bay
No.
have some stories about my brother Chalky and I, and about some of my cousins. But we've tried. Most of us turned out pretty good. So, and now we're trying to teach our kids, and we got that lesson. Just wait till your kids grow up, and then you're like, oh man, they start doing what you did. So, that's starting to come true. And you're like, oh,
But
just
you're
listen to
right.
me.
I was
But
I
no, but
was
we had
pretty
pretty good
tame.
kids, pretty good. So yeah. I like that. That felt like home, listening to Kathy talking like that.
Oh, yeah. I wish I could have. I'm a little bit jealous of you guys being able to sit there with her because that was wonderful and I really enjoyed that. Um, so again, going back to the respect thing,
Yeah,
our well-being also requires good water.
yeah,
Like our bodies are primarily made up of water, and we need good water in order to live. And I don't often talk about just surviving because I think that's a little bit less than basic, and I want to say live because that's part of Mina Bamazo and living the good life, right? And
yeah,
so water is essential to all of us, and including the land and the air because there's water in the air too. And it has also been declared a human right by the United Nations. And I like that, Kathy. She talked about water and she talked a little bit about some of the water that's not so good.
yeah,
And she alluded to why some of that water was no good because there was changes to the land because there were some um, controls, I want to say. I don't want to give it all away when we're leading into the clip,
yeah.
but some controls weren't there to allow the water to be standing still. And it was an activity that people had done um, quite a lot of, and they weren't doing so much of that. So that also
Yeah.
changed the water. So let's hear that clip.
Well, I lived in Abuki when I was teaching there. I was there for 3 years recently, before COVID, and we had to get water from the plain.
Yep.
We couldn't drink the Albany River
Yeah.
water because they told us not to drink it. And some of the things I saw when I used to live in Fort Hope, we used to travel up and down the river, and there was so many beaver around every bend.
Wow.
Big beaver house everywhere. And I think that was part of the reason that water, because nobody was trapping,
Yeah.
nobody was really killing them, and
So the water slowed down, and then the
Yes.
quality wasn't.
even around Washi Lake where we live, it's kind of a beach and a bay.
Yeah.
We couldn't drink water anymore from the shore.
Oh.
We had to go way out there in the middle, and we couldn't take a cup and drink. We had to boil it.
Oh, jeez.
And
Yeah.
we did take water from here to, for
Yeah.
drinking and making. We made tea out of the Albany River as long as you boiled it long enough,
Wow.
15 minutes.
So those beavers,
Yeah.
because they weren't being trapped anymore, there was so many beaver dams that were slowing down the water,
Yeah.
affecting the water quality, and you couldn't drink it right out
Yeah.
of the river like you
Yeah.
did before. Wow.
Because we were there a while ago. It was small. Matthew, must have been 20 years ago. My husband Dan, at the time,
Edit that out. Edit that out of the final product. That's my
he
uncle.
drank water from the shore. We used to do that at the camp. Just go out there a little ways and drink water. Wow, he did that. He went out there in his rubber boots and took a cup and drank. He was so sick.
Oh no, really?
Liver disease.
Fever.
Oh, Giardia. Oh, jeez. Oh.
That's how bad it was. That was about 20 years ago.
Oh, wow.
Because beaver water just stays in that little bay, doesn't move much.
Yeah, yeah.
So,
How long was he sick for?
yeah, he was sick for a while because we came to town. As soon as he came to town, he went to Geraldton Hospital, got medication,
Jeez.
cleaned
Oh,
him up. Well,
boy.
that was awful.
Wow,
Wow.
eh?
Do you wanna open first? Do you want me to?
Go ahead.
I think, and this can be the a market difference between Indigenous and non-Indigenous is when things are out of whack or out of balance, disease becomes an indicator that something is off. If with beavers, if they start modifying the water too much, you start getting beaver fever because there's not enough water movement. It's out of whack, and so you have to go balance it as a human. But it also applies to the projects. You can see that with hydropower dams, which there are some downstream in Martin Falls. Vegetation falls into the dam and it decays and it leaves mercury, so you get increased methylmercury because things are out of whack. There's not enough water flow. And we got to balance because you need electricity in a modern world, but you have to figure out how to increase water flow so that doesn't happen, and so the vegetation can sluice through. And so when you start a project with this in mind, it's going to be a better project just because of that differing worldview, that if things get out of whack, the Indigenous worldview is something you're going to pay for it. And I think that's very different than the Western or non-Indigenous worldview at times, because I'm not saying that it's perfect on our side, not on the other. But there can be this feeling like everything can be mitigated, and sometimes that thought, having gone into consequence, is just left to like, well, we'll mitigate it and it'll be fine. But you have to put that deep thought in, like, and Indigenous, it can be slower for us because that's how we think.
Well, it's very thorough and well-rounded thinking. Like,
Yeah.
listening to Kathy talk about the standing water and the sickness that it had caused. And so we've held a number of public open houses for Northern Road Link, 4 of them so far. And we've also had 2 Aboriginal Treaty Rights and Interests gatherings, and we've also
Yeah.
had 2 gathering and expo. So 4 larger gatherings that included all of the 3 proposed road projects in Treaty 9. And so some of these concerns are about water and people cautioning us about water and ensuring that the water is safe and wanting to understand the flow of water. Just there is a lot about water. I'm not sure, like in I think it goes in trends depending on exactly what we're looking at, but I feel like water is one of the top concerns.
For sure. Um, I mean, especially up north where it's all interconnected, like, because this is how interconnected things are. I went and I was doing a documentary for McDowell Lake, and they just gotten their First Nation territory back. They brought me on their land, and they showed me water routes, and so they brought me to a place, and on the rocks there, they're like, "This is a spiritual place," and then they said, "We're going to bring you to Pitecrass." We don't know what they mean because McDowell Lake is Cree Oji-Cree. And I went there, and I recognized them. They're Anishinaabe, saying there's a river up ahead. You got a portage. It's rough going. And I said, "Oh my God, that's Anishinaabe stuff." And they said, "Oh, okay. Well, we never heard of that." And I said, "Yeah, well, this territory it must have been traversed by us long, like because these are really really old." And that was super far from our territory, like, but the rivers, the portaging, being able to take all these routes, they extended all the way that direction west. And I've heard about routes from our territory, Lake Nipigon, up to Martin Falls, because we have a common and shared history, and we take the waterways to get up there. And then Martin Falls to Bumatung, you can take rivers and get all the way there. Well, you used to. Like, I'm not saying you necessarily do anymore. There's other ways now, but they're all interconnected all the way from the oceans up above. So it's very sensitive, I think, more than anything, is the water. As if the water gets sick, everything gets sick, as they always say, right?
Yeah, and being very cognizant of that. And so that leads me, because you said you don't know necessarily if you can travel at this time to another community. So that brings me to a little bit of discussion around climate change, because the people have been experiencing that.
Yeah.
And we know that because that's one of the big reasons why there are these roads that are being proposed, because
Yeah.
the winter roads, that season is getting shorter and shorter. And so this is why they want all season access roads. So now
Yeah.
looking at climate change, Kathy noticed that the winters are noticeably different, right? So let's roll that clip.
Yeah.
Cold, I mean cold.
Yeah.
We weren't let out. We couldn't go out
Yeah.
to go play.
It was that cold. Yeah.
Yeah. But the only time we could go out was to go to the bathroom. Somebody would go with us. So
Yeah.
one of our older siblings or stand and wait for us. So that's then I went back when I went to work there, and it wasn't that cold.
Yeah.
Yeah. To me, when I used to walk to work in the morning, this other teacher and I, oh, this is so nice. It's nice and warm. Minus 20 or something.
Exactly. It was a warm day.
Yeah,
Minus
it's
20.
warm. You know the difference?
Oh yeah.
When I was growing up, it was cold.
Now the thing that we hear a
Yeah. Has winter changed much since you were a kid, Tony?
Okay. Well, I always read a lot, and I try to make sure what I say is as accurate to the common scientific consensus as possible. Like, that's just how I've always been. So I differentiate between local weather effects and then overall, and I will say like cyclically, we've had generally the same, I think, but in its overall intensity during these, because like localized cycle, meaning like in 1987, I think it was Anders and I had 24 feet of snow. It was minus 47 for a month straight. Like they were keeping you at home because it was so cold. It was minus 51 one morning, and then that's happened again as part of like you can see these little cycles, but the intensity. And now that we're going through a downward swing, the intensity has increased. So it's the same cycle, but like it's plus, like it's +8 on the in middle of March on a road when it should be probably below freezing, right? So this expansion of I've seen it. Not the least of which is like even in when we were kids in '91 with the UV layer, we experienced that over a period of years playing basketball outside with your shirt off, you were okay, and then all of a sudden you weren't. You were burning, and so it was crazy to think these man-made things were causing this huge change. So yeah, I've definitely experienced it, but I always modify because people will look at local swings and go, "Well, see, this is climate change. We never get snow at the end of April, not this much," and it's like, no, that's cyclical. But the fact that it was plus in February this year, you know what I mean? Like that's really weird. So it's been some odd. Excuse me. I'm sorry, but up north with the ice is insane to see it because I remember the ice being like super thick, like crazy. Like we go ice fishing, my dad, it auger down, and then you could see the change. Just the overall temperature variation, that little bit of energy not coming out of the water and staying in the water because it was too warm in the air. Like wow, and they're really paying for it and seeing it up north.
That's it, because I was listening to the interview with Kathy, and she was talking about that blue ice,
Yeah,
and we were when were we up in Webequie? I know we've been there a few times, but the one time we were asking questions about climate change, and I was with you, and Chris McKay was there, and Don was there, and so the people were really talking about the difference that they've noticed in the past number of years about how the ice is behaving, and it's not the same. And so when
no, it
they're
isn't.
traveling, they talk about never going out alone to make sure that
Yeah,
they're safe, and always having radios. And they said they haven't really seen that blue ice that was being talked about like that in a very, very long time. And I call it punky. The ice is kind of punky.
it's extreme. The extreme temperature creates that ice, like just a continuous cold air that the heat is getting extracted out of the lake, and then it creates that wonderful blue ice. It's different. There's actually chemically, it's different internally with its crystalline structures. It's hard, like hitting with an axe. Your axe will bounce off. Whereas the other ice that forms under changing temperature valuation it's like it's different in its overall hardness, longevity. So when you don't have that hard, I think the way to describe that is you'll see it sometimes in the city. It's super shiny, reflective, and ultra hard. Like if you stamp your foot on it, even if you see a bubble under it, you hurt your foot. Like it's hard to explain to people in the city. Like, but it only happens like ultra cold, rapid freeze of ice, pushes all the minerals out, and it just becomes this weird blue ice because it's really pure. So for anyone wondering what we're talking about, and it doesn't melt as readily. It's because it's more of a pure crystal, so
Takes
it's
time to
latent
melt.
heat. It's hard to absorb heat into it, so it's really important for ice roads the other ice you can use, but its overall density is different. So if you got a 50-ton transport, like remember the documentary I did, we were behind 50-ton transports. So if you don't have that ice, now you got, and we've seen that in the last, I'd say 15 years, transports crashing through, cars crashing through,
Yeah.
like crashing through. Can you crashing through ice? I always say if this was happening in Toronto, it would be done. There'd be a road built already. People would be like, yeah, okay, let's just do this. Like, no, 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 we're not messing around with this. But the Indigenous experience is always a little bit different.
Absolutely. Just want to let people know if they would like to weigh in, they can send us an email, info@northernroadlink.com, or visit our website, northernroadlink. What is it, Tony?
NorthernRoadlink.ca.
northernroadlink.ca. Wait, that part mixes me up a little bit. So we are coming to the end, and so like I said earlier, we're focusing on community voices for the Northern Road Link programs at this time. So we talked to Gord Wabos, and we talked to he's from Webequie First Nation, and we also talked to Leslie Spence from Webequie First Nation, and we included his clips and interview parts last week in the radio program, and today we are including clips from the interview you and Don did with Kathy Baxter, your auntie
Yep.
from Martin Falls First Nation.
Well, thanks for having me on the show. Even though it's a fill-in and it was kind of no
On your
choice,
show?
but let's pretend you had a
But
choice.
did
Thank you for
good.
having me
You
on.
did really good.
Guys, we got a
It's nice
radio
to
show
change
coming up
things
at
up
2,
once in a
so
while. We do. We sure do. That's exciting. We get to play some tunes and everyone can join us. And we're a little bit more entertaining on the radio because we like to deliver our education and awareness through infotainment, I like to call it.
infotainment. I'm going to be serious.
Infotainment.
No joking for me in the radio show.
I'll do all the joking then, Tony.
Well, now we're. Uh-oh.
But we play music. So, and we have radio clips and we have music. So
Yeah.
we're not talking so much either.
It's true, yeah. No, we'll have a good show. It was fun. Even this. Oh, what? It's Anishinaabe.
Oh,
Even this was fun. See the little digs we do as Anishinaabe people. No, but this was good. Not even this was good. This was good. So I'm
it was
glad we
just
had this.
gooder.
This is gooder. This is the bestest.
All right. Well, Chimigwech.
Yeah. All right. Well, make sure if you want to leave us a voice message, 1-844. Let me bring the number up because we switched it recently. And it is 1-844-722-4300. That's 1-844-722-4300. You can leave us a message. We'll answer it on the next show. And you can call in live on the radio show. So make sure to call us, leave your thoughts, and we will get back to you.
Chimigwech, Bamapi.
Baba P.